To celebrate Women in Sport Week 2025, Vision Sports Ireland were delighted to catch up with a number of our female athletes who represented Team Ireland in the 2024 Paralympic Games for our very special International Women's Day webinar. We're delighted to be joined by Katie George Dunleavy, Linda Kelly, Josephine Helian, Greta Streamakita, and Judith and Chloe McComb. Katie George Dunleavy and Linda Kelly. Tell the girls watching, say a little bit about your background and how you actually found cycling.
Yeah, it's actually quite a long story, so I'll make it short. But I did many sports and activities, many competition sports at school and then college. I started rowing when I was at university, and I was rowing for a number of years, 6 years, and I just had so many setbacks in rowing, and I wanted to get to the Paralympics in Beijing, and it didn't happen. And then again in London, I had a lot of injuries and kind of lost support there. And then I heard that Ireland were getting a para rowing squad together for London, and I was eligible through my father being from Donegal. And I contacted them and said, I've been rowing for 6 years, I'm at a decent level. And they said, oh, brilliant, come over. So I went over to Cork and I did some testing, I did some training with them and then trials, and I missed out selection for the World Championships. But based on that, the para cycling coach asked if I'd like to try out cycling. This was 2011. And then less than a year later, I was at London Paralympic Games for cycling. So yeah, so one door closed, another opened, and it was just through opportunities. And I think from me being stubborn and not giving up and being very determined that another sport came my way, and I think cycling is definitely the sport meant for me. Because that was 13 years ago now, 14 years ago now, nearly.
Like from a very young age, similar to Katie as well. So my background was actually like soccer GA until my early 20s, and then eventually I switched over to a triathlon, which is your swim, bike, run. So I did that for about 2 years and 2-3 years. And then I switched over to the bike. So I decided not to be doing 3 disciplines and try focus on one discipline instead. And I took this like cycling, I loved it. And it was 2021 I started racing on the bike and doing different races around Ireland, Roscommon, all those different kind of races. And then 2022 I done the Cycling Ireland Talent ID program, and I was approached by the head coach as well. Would I try out on the tandem bike as a pilot? So it was actually 2022 I met Katie, and that's where it all started from. So yeah.
For you guys, like, what does a week in the life look like? Like, what does a training week actually look like? Because it's pretty serious. Like, there's a lot going on throughout the week, and trying to fit things like this in on top of it. So what kind of does a week look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty full on, and at the moment we're at our homes, training like individually. So I'll be indoors. I haven't been out on an outdoor bike since the World Championships of September. So I'm doing all my sessions on a turbo indoors, which is I'm starting to struggle a bit mentally with that because it's been a long time, but I'm pretty used to it at the same time. And I have my ways of getting through a session, but we're doing kind of like 18, 19, 20 hours a week. So it's kind of like between bike sessions, and then we'll do gym as well. So I'm doing kind of 3 gym sessions, and then the rest will be on bike. And we don't do running, we don't do any swimming or anything like that. And we're trying to stay off our feet as much as we can in between those sessions, because we're training kind of 6 days, sometimes 7 days a week. So recovery is really important, nutrition, sleeping, and everything around that.
So you mentioned about the spending so much time on the turbo. When we've asked pretty much all the athletes so far. So what's in your ears when you're on that turbo? Like, are you listening to podcasts or music? And like, we've heard pretty varied responses on it. What is in your ears?
I would be listening to music mainly. I love music. I have a huge passion for music, and I love so much different sorts of music, but listening to new music as well. So I could happily listen to the music for 3.5 hours. And then I would be actually watching Netflix and watching Amazon Prime and all Disney and everything on the series on there and films. So I get through an awful lot of those. That just keeps me going.
I would believe it.
Yeah,
I would believe it.
like when I have an interval session, I actually can't have any noise, not even music. So I'll just silence. Yeah, so that's me. Yeah.
And Linda, what's in your ears?
Well, when I'm inside, I have like, if it's a long 4-hour session, endurance, like, yeah, you have to find something to watch on the telly or a playlist or both to have something going like in the room. But as Katie said, if it's intervals, like, yeah, obviously, like you're focusing on them and you're not really, well, you'll have music maybe going, but you wouldn't be watching something. But I'm mainly outdoor, so I'm out in the cold, I'm out in the frost. There'll be often frosty days or windy days or lashing rain days. It's Ireland, so that's the crack in Ireland, really. Like, it's or you might go out and it's a beautiful day. Like this week has been beautiful. So yeah, I've gotten used to the outdoors. It's probably the longest now I've been home in a while, because last year and the year before we were kind of home and abroad, so we're out in the sun. I've spent the last 3-4 months now training in the cold, so I'm looking forward to the warm weather.
A few warm weather camps upcoming, hopefully, says you. And girls, like you mentioned there, Katie, like that's crazy to think about. You actually haven't been on a bike since the World Championships, and like you probably get out for a training camp, but then you're probably into international competition again. Like, how does that relationship work? And I know I've heard you say it multiple times about when you were with Eve and everything that comes to that, where you'd come over, and during COVID as well. It's a really interesting piece where you actually came and pretty much lived with Eve for a while, because you actually needed to just be on the bike and be in that bubble. But it must be difficult for you to kind of get on that bike and that relationship to kind of, even from when you start to now, it's probably okay, you've built that relationship, but actually not seeing each other and not actually being on that bike for a massive period of time probably plays a role in it.
Yeah, but I think that time that we had together just stands to us. And when we come together, it's like it's crazy. Even though I haven't been out on an outdoor bike, I haven't been out on a tandem, or Linda hasn't been out on a tandem. Once we get on it, it's just like your body's so used to it, your mind's so used to it. I'm like, we're grand, you know. Like I'm just like, oh yeah, it feels like yesterday, but it hasn't been. It's been like over 6 months, you know. But it's just that time that we put in together. We put in a lot of time, even last year with the chat. Like we had some injuries and illnesses. We did spend a lot of time together, and we put that time in together on the camps with the squad, but also on our own self-funded camps. And then the year before, we had plenty of time together. So we will have time together coming up. We have a camp in a few weeks' time. We can't wait. Like Linda can't wait to get out, and I can't wait to get out on a bike, and Linda can't wait to get out into that warm weather, because she's been battling the elements the last 4 or 5 months outdoors, and which is fair play to her, you know. She's had to, like, we're determined and we'll do whatever it takes to do. But yeah, it's that time that we've had together, and we will then, when we are together, we'll work on what we need to work on and carry on building that relationship that we have.
And is it too much of a pun to say it's just like riding a bike when you get back on after so many months?
It pretty much is. And even like with Linda on the tandem, you know, she's been on a solar bike. She'll know the length. She'll feel like, you'll feel it, won't you, Linda? But you're like, after a session or even a few minutes, you'll be like, oh yeah.
Yeah. It just all
like,
falls back.
It's like muscle memory, kind of, when the first couple of minutes you're back on it. I remember when I first started the tandem bike, when I used to be out abroad with Katie or do 2 weeks somewhere and come back home to the solo bike, I used to get a strange sensation when I got back to the solo bike. Like, it was wobbling. I'd actually stopped the bike one day and I was like, I think there's something wrong. I rang my coach at the time and I was like, I think there's something wrong with the bike, because I was 5 minutes from his house. But he said he knew himself because he was on a tandem before as a pilot, and he just said, cycle your bike for another 10 minutes and it'll be fine. And it was so, yeah, like as Katie said, like we'll get used to it very quick. And yeah, like we do the extra camps together, and if like there's any big events coming up, we do the self-funded camps, and Katie might come to Wexford sometimes as well, and we get a good week or two there. There might be a time trial on in Wexford that we'll do as well. So yeah, we do get a lot of quality time, and then we keep in touch a lot as well over the phone and check in on each other, and that's mainly important as well, to see how we're doing.
Good. Like what we've heard from some of the athletes previous to, it's like it actually is such a big part of just being friends or just being pals. Like it plays a big role in that kind of pilot and stoker relationship as well.
Oh yeah, I think it's really important. We are friends because we spend a lot of time together, but we're going through a huge thing together. And when we won those medals for it, like it's such a special moment that you get with someone else. I had it with Eve and I had it with Linda, and no one else knows what you've gone through to get there, and what training you've each done. The hurt that you've gone through to get those medals, and to have that special moment with someone up there when you've had that relief of getting that medal or being on the podium, and it all coming together on that day, for both of you, is really special. And like I said, no one knows what that's like. So it's a really special bond that we have, and like we do have a friendship. We get on really well. So it's really important to support each other, because we have to support each other. Like we want to encourage and support each other. And we both have to be doing well, but we want each other to do well.
And there was a quote that Eve said back in Family House after Paris, and it was that she's not just there to steer. And I think that's such a big piece, because when you hear about the pilot, you're probably thinking that they're just there, but like it's such a team piece. Like it's both of you together. You're like a team, and it's that has to have a massive kind of role where you need to make sure that you are both as an in one, like when you're going out on that bike. So it has to play a big role. And you mentioned, Katie, there about the kind of hurt or what you went through. You didn't have the easiest run up to Paris last year and everything that came with it.
No, it wasn't ideal, and it's not what you wouldn't wish on anyone or anything. But yeah, it's part of racing, and sometimes bad things happen, and we crashed in both the World Cups. In the road racing, the first one Linda got concussion, the second one I got a broken collarbone. So we had a bit of time off, and then we had to both recover and get back on. But I didn't, I kind of looked at it in a positive way. But of course, I was in the hospital and it was agony, and I had that for a few weeks before I started to kind of get back on the bike. But I was kind of like, it could have been worse, and I will be in Paris and hopefully get a medal. But it's about controlling what you can control. And I just was focusing on what I could do, and there was plenty I could do. And I was back on the bike with one arm pedaling away 6 weeks after the operation, and looking after myself as well at the same time, knowing that I was recovering from a major, quite serious operation. It's still even giving me jep every now and again. I still feel it. I know it's there, but my plates and pins in my body, but I'm still pushing on and working hard, and eating well. That's important. And then Linda, she had recovery to get back to. As an athlete, injury and illness, it's like one of the worst things, because you're lying there and you're going, you just think you're like losing your fitness and all that hard work you put in, and you think your competitors are training away. It's awfully mentally, it's tough. It can be really tough.
And like it must have been so amazing after everything that you had gone through to actually go to Paris and be there and experience everything that comes with it. And I know, Linda, this was your first experience of it, and Katie, it definitely wasn't your first experience. You're a number of years getting there and trying to get there in different sports, but it must have been really amazing. I know, like we heard time and time again about it being a home games, but that really must have had like the support that you guys had on the side of the road and in the velodrome and everything that came with it. That must have really kind of helped when you were there.
Oh yeah, absolutely, for sure. I had most of my family were there, and I think we had the like loudest out of all the countries there, and everyone, the group of people. So we had like a big support there, and it was so amazing when we were standing on the podium and they were there, and it was a very emotional moment. As I had no family in Tokyo when myself and Eve won our medals, there was like I've watched back the pursuit final against Great Britain where we won the silver, and there's no one in any of the seats. And it's amazing. At the time, you don't really like focus on it or think about it. You're doing the race, you're focused on the racing, and you're racing, and you could be racing on the moon. And then it's only when you're in Paris, it was just so loud. I remember the last 2 laps in the final against GB. It felt like my eardrums were going to explode. It was so loud by the noise of the crowd. And knowing that my mum and dad were right there, and it was just amazing. But it's just such a different experience and a really special moment to receive those medals in front of my family.
And Linda, for that first experience of all things Paralympic Games, like that must have been an amazing experience.
It absolutely was. Like, it's something I'll never forget. Because I was actually at a talk last week at my old college, and my lecturer actually, he did up this video of me and Katie getting our medals and the national anthem, and I actually shed a tear at that, because I just like, looking back on it, you just like see how amazing it was as well, and it's still surreal. And like, it was only like when I had a week off of Christmas and I was unwell and I wasn't on the bike as much, I was kind of reflecting back on everything, and it was just like, I just can't believe it when you're holding like the medals around your neck, and like you look at them and you're like, oh, I have this. It's, it's just, to be there itself is just an achievement. And just getting those medals with Katie as well, like, and sharing those memories together, it's like, yeah, it's just one thing I'll always remember for sure. Like, so.
Oh, like just the kids at home, like like I know when you say it and you're like, oh, you guys are role models, but there is kids at home and young girls that are watching, and like you are their inspirations, and they want to be you guys when they grow up, and they want to win those medals and have it around their neck. And I suppose it just goes to show the kind of impact that it can have. And I know, Katie, you had a lot of, like, we seen some quotes that were pulled out of post interviews, like the amount of adrenaline that you have going through your body, but then for you to actually sit down and have that microphone put in your mouth and to say that those quotes, but like that's what it was. Like, you were inspirations to young girls and vision impaired kids all over the country as well, to show that anything is possible, and setbacks kind of can stand your way, but that things are possible. And like, it must be really, I'd imagine, really nice feeling to know that what you're doing, although it's this amazing thing for you, for your family, it does so much more as well.
Yeah, it goes much further than you think and you realise. And it's only really after Paris that I've really noticed that. And I think that's why I've said it, and I haven't said it before. I was very open where I haven't been before, really, about my journey and maybe that inspiring children. And when I was a child, I had huge struggles and with like self-confidence and low self-esteem, and it was through sport that it's really helped me and kind of saved me. So if I could like inspire, and there was no role models as well when I was a child, no visually impaired people on the TV, no sports stars or anything. So if I can be inspirational, just gives a child or even an adult hope, then that's just an amazing thing. I think it's a wonderful thing, and it goes beyond what we do for ourselves and our family, for sure. I'm going to a school actually next week and to inspire children, and you never know who you'll touch. If it touches one child, and then it's job on, it's worth doing.
Absolutely, and it's so amazing as well. We say like you're inspiring vision impaired kids around the country, but you're inspiring kids without vision impairments as well, and that's a really amazing thing as well, to actually have somebody with a disability, and of course from our side a vision impairment, to be so inspirational. And like I heard actually a mother from one of the schools he went out to, and the feedback was that this was an amazing talk, and they're coming from young kids and they realize the actual impact that you guys are having, and that, I suppose, you think and you're on the turbo, but you're actually doing so much more than just cycling the bike and everything that comes with that. And I think that you mentioned about kind of the difference in post Paris, like the content and the actual coverage of the games this time being so much increased over previous games. Like, that has a big impact as well, where people were actually like, okay, everybody watches the Olympics and you hear, and they're like, oh, I think I could take up rhythmic gymnastics, and everybody's an expert after watching it. But for now, it actually gave the opportunity for the Paralympics to be the same thing, where people were watching it and they were just sitting down in their houses as families watching the games, which is a really amazing thing.
Yeah, it's absolutely massive. It's all about visibility, isn't it? And it's what they, if you can't see, you can't be. So for the Paralympics to have more coverage every 4 years, it's brilliant, and it just needs to keep on going. And the Irish media and the Irish Federation, everyone needs to, promote the athletes more, Paralympics Ireland, what we're doing, and so everyone can see what we're doing, but just to promote the sport, and is that visibility for any children out there or anyone there, to show how amazing the Paralympics are, as well as the Olympics. It's all amazing. And sport can give so much to so many people. I know so many people got huge from Rio, you know, all the games that I went to, I spoke to so many people in Donegal, other parts of Ireland, and in England here, and they were just, it gave them so much joy just watching the sport when they knew that there was someone in it that they knew. They were like, oh my goodness, you know, we saw you, you know, even last week, a lady from Kerry down the road, she recognised me here in England, and I was like, oh my goodness, and she said, I watched you, and you're brilliant. And I was like, oh wow, it's amazing. So sport can give just so much to people, and so the more we can show, and that visibility is just so important, especially visual impairment, where a lot of them is non-visible disabilities. So I think that's very important to kind of promote that more.
And Linda as well. So obviously you went to that Talent ID day, and it was kind of, would you be interested in this? Like, would you have kind of advice for potential tandem pilots or people that are cycling at home, that maybe this is an option for them? Like, I know as an organisation we're trying to kind of work on that and have people come up along those lines and get involved, and we have our tandem pilot training course for kind of recreational pilots, but also for people to learn what it's like to actually get on the bike. Like you said, that there is differences and the things that come with it. Like, do you have any advice for someone that maybe goes, God, maybe I wouldn't mind it. It might be from recreational to go for a Sunday spin, or it could be that you want to be out with the next Katie George and winning medals in the Paralympics. But would you have advice for people that maybe might be interested?
Yeah, I'd say don't be afraid to try it out. I think like the tandem, there's something special about it as well. Like, I came from a background of team sports growing up, and to come onto the tandem with Katie, like, you know, it's that team sport element again. I think it's a lovely skill to have as well. Like, as you said, like, whether someone wants to recreationally do it, or, you know, eventually like go on and race someday, like I love the tandem. It's fun, it's fast. And you know, like, you're both pushing each other as well. Like, you're both, like, it forms a friendship, it forms, you know, a great team. And yeah, I'd say, you know, definitely try it out, like, to anyone. So
And Katie, for you, and I know you've mentioned a lot already, but what I'm asking each of the athletes is, like, what advice would you give to a young girl, particularly if we're saying young girls, it's Women in Sport Week, International Women's Day. What advice would you give to a young girl out there, or even someone a little bit older that thinks maybe sport wasn't an option for them, and it's something that they want to get into? What would you have advice, or what advice would you give to them that maybe to get into it?
Yeah, I'd like reach out to, like, even things like yourself, Vision Sports Ireland, or maybe a friend or someone, and just try sports out. And if there's one that you don't like, try another one out. And it's all about enjoyment when you're younger, so it's just about enjoying the sport. If you want to do it competitively, you can, but it's really about having fun and just being active, because it can just give you so much being active, and especially, you know, that social aspect, which I think is really important. That's what I got from, like, the tandem cycling, is this, like, the social, the connecting with people, but also, you know, when I used to row, it used to be with a group of girls, and it was such good fun. Like, the social aspect around it was so important as well. So it's really, I would just say, just find a club, or Vision Sports would maybe to help you. They have, you know, you have so many different tryout days, so just try a sport out and just give it a go, and you never know, it might lead to something in the future.
And one other thing as well, one question for you, and this is one that stumps some of the athletes that we've asked so far. If I was to ask you, what advice would you give to your younger self? It might be similar, it might be different. If you were to think back, and this goes for both, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Advice, but maybe just set, like, what to be told, like, everything will be okay, like, it will be okay. As I said, I think as a youngster I struggled a lot. I went to the special school, and I found that quite hard at first, and yeah, it was a bit of a difficult time for myself when I was diagnosed at the age of 11. I didn't really understand, so for me it was all about, everything's going to be okay, and just to yeah, never give up as well.
And Linda?
I'd probably say to my younger self, like, or anyone going into sports, is like, believe in yourself, and, you know, definitely like, yeah, just like go with your heart on things, and, like, don't follow what someone else might think might be good for you. Like, go with like what you like, you know yourself. Don't be afraid to make the leap. I definitely say, and I was also saying to students at the college last week that like don't be afraid to try different things out in life, no matter how old you are as well. You know, like try different sports. There might be something you don't like or you do like, and something you might become passionate about and follow your dreams in. Like I started cycling really when I was 28. So I just try to tell that to young people, like, don't be afraid, no matter how old you are, like, just definitely try different things. And yeah.
That having that belief in yourself and taking those leaps and just trying things is because you never know where it could lead to. You know, Linda started at 28 cycling. I was like nearly 30, and look where we are. So it's just you never know what happened, but it's about believing in yourself and going for things.
I think before we finish up, it's important to know we know what Linda does in her spare time anyway with that Minecraft background. I'm sure she has lots of spare time to be doing that. Whether she put that on purpose or by accident, who knows? But look, girls, thank you so much for joining us today and saying those kind of inspirational bits. It's been really, really lovely to hear your story, and we look forward to kind of following everything that you do over this year and over the coming years.
Hi, my name is Josephine Helian and I'm Paralympian.
So, do you want to tell us a little bit about how you actually first got into cycling? Because I'm sure that the people on the call today might already be out on tandems. They might be thinking that that's an option maybe in the future. Do you want to give the guys a little bit of a background into how you decided to get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I suppose going way back, the NCVI, known as Vision Ireland now, actually set up summer programs where they would do trial maybe different types of sports or computer courses or different skill-based stuff, etc. So during the summertime, myself and my sister, who's actually visually impaired as well, got asked to do tandem cycling. And we jumped at the opportunity. We were like, oh yeah, brilliant, we get to get on a bike, this is class. So what they did was they took a group of us out to, it was beside an Astro pitch in Portlaoise where we first did it, and there was kind of a group of us that were different age groups, or different age variations of age, and I'd say myself and my sister are probably the youngest couple there, and we were just really eager to get back on. Every time we had to go on the back of the bike, it was brilliant. They got a group of volunteers with a group of and they had bikes, and they just took us out in turns on the back. And it was brilliant. I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I suppose I would have been maybe 10, 11 at the time. And then, so anytime that program came up where they were gathering volunteers and doing the tandems, they'd always contact myself and my sister because we just really enjoyed it and wanted to take everybody's go. So I think then, like that, I kind of we took part in that program quite a bit throughout maybe 10 years, I'd say, maybe a little bit less. So like that, anytime I came up, we went. And then came the opportunity where they were gathering volunteers, and what they done was they organised a meeting with local clubs to gather these volunteers and bikes for the tandems program that they were running. So they invited anybody that was really interested in cycling to come along to the meeting. So myself and my sister went along, and we got in touch with Tullamore Cycling and Touring Club in the meeting, and they asked, like, if you had any interest in kind of maybe joining up or connecting up with a club, reach out to your local club here, and sure, we'll see what can happen. So I'd say I was probably about 19 at the time, and the club were really enthusiastic about helping us out and getting out on the road. And I think we first our first spin was like 30 kilometers, which we were amazed at the time. We were just like, oh my god, 30 kilometers. To literally
You'd be delighted if that was a long spin for you now.
Oh yeah, you wouldn't see it now. I don't see much of 30k rides now, but yeah, at the time we were just like thrilled. And the club were brilliant. They were so enthusiastic. Like my sister's first spin wasn't even on a proper tandem. It was on a recumbent tandem. So that's like the front person's like sitting down. But I was lucky enough, I was too small. So I got the tandem. And I rode with Billy, the club pilot, for a long time up until I kind of started to get into competitive cycling. So yeah, that's kind of how I first got into it, I suppose. And like that, the club were just brilliant, and we went out on summer during the summertime, especially while I was in college. Myself and my sister, we had more free time, and of course, being on summer holidays and whatever. And we loved going out with the club during the summer, and we tried to keep it up during the winter. And like that, college came first, so studies and the books came first, and that kind of took over. But then in the spring, the club would run like a spin class. We took part in that then, and kind of got somewhat fit enough to go back out on the road then during the summer. So yeah, it was brilliant. Really enjoyed the getting involved with the club, and they were so enthusiastic. We were very lucky.
I know for sure that they are very enthusiastic, because I did have the opportunity to actually go over and watch you guys in the velodrome, and every corner I turned there was Tullamore Cycling Club bibs on people over in Paris. So I know that they're definitely still behind you every step of the way. A couple of years later since you that first day you got up on a bike. But you mentioned, Josie, around volunteers there a lot of the time, and we would have like a lot that maybe watching today, or a lot that come in through Vision Sports, volunteer their time as tandem pilots. We have tandem pilot training courses. I suppose, would you have kind of any advice or anything to kind of get potential tandem pilots involved? Because you mentioned about how they're volunteering, that was club, and they probably didn't have a lot of experience with tandem bikes before, and kind of being a pilot. So would you have kind of any advice for people?
Just do it. I
think you robbed that from Nike, didn't you?
Yeah, actually, yeah. It is their slogan, yeah. I think sometimes people kind of get in their heads a bit about it, and think of, oh God, I don't understand how this operates. Really, it's about getting on and actually just riding. I would pick, a safe, like that, like the tandem pilot course that you guys run is fabulous. It's amazing for people to get into it who might be interested, have no idea how to get involved maybe, or don't know how to even start a conversation, or whatever. So that course is obviously class. If you can get involved with that, I think it's phenomenal. And it's really vital, I think, to kind of get the background stuff, not just the bike, but even say guiding to and from the bike if you're stopping at a shop, or whatever. Those things are kind of really important to kind of understand, and even understand maybe the person that they're cycling with, what level of vision they have. It's life-changing for somebody like me. Like, even my sister, like, she's now pregnant, so she isn't on a bike at the moment, but we have been super involved in the club, and the club has just been amazing in that. Now I'm quite lucky. I've had a few pilots now, I suppose. So, but starting out, I had my main pilot was Billy from day one nearly. But my sister has actually had a few different pilots in the club who volunteered. But it's a really rewarding experience. It's different because it is definitely a team, and there's a lot of communication needed, I suppose, from front to back. When you don't see what's coming ahead on the road, it's kind of important to communicate that back to the person who's cycling with you. So communication really is key, and ask all the questions. As silly as you may think that they are, or if they're still really vital to kind of ask. So yeah, I do think it like, we had great crack, and we always do have great crack on the bikes. And yeah, it's a different type of sport, but it's class. If you can get involved, I'd highly recommend it to anybody that's even considering doing it. But it is life changing for the likes of me and my sister, who are just to go from cycling. Well, I was told I wasn't going to be able to ride a bike anymore by an eye specialist. So to go from being told you'll never ride a bike again to getting on a tandem is just it's incredible. And to get out in the outdoors, like I said, it's life changing.
I suppose you mentioned that kind of first day where, yes, you were lucky enough to get on the on the tandem while you fought your sister for it. But what was it that actually flicked that switch in you to go, oh, maybe this is something that I could kind of pursue a little bit more seriously, and kind of look towards that professional side of things, or that kind of Paralympic side of things?
Yeah, it's funny because I never really thought of it as a competitive sport, and I didn't really understand even how to get. For me, I suppose when I started, it was only this was a way of like getting out into the outdoors. It was a little bit of like, you know, getting a bit of physical exercise in and enjoying the club, enjoying the laugh with the lads. We always had good crack, and that's all it was about for me, I suppose, at the time. I never really thought of that anymore. I was in college, I was studying, I was, you know, pursuing a career down the business route. So I hadn't really thought of competitive cycling. And I did travel. I went to Canada for 6 months and came back. And when I did come back, I was working and commuting full time up to Dublin. So I didn't actually come back and join back in with the club straight away. And it was actually during COVID, I was lended the opportunity to work from home, and I had a few extra hours, I suppose, in my day. I actually took up running, and it was running around my back garden to begin with.
Lots of circles.
Literally, at home in my family home, like it's out in the country, and it has, you know, it's a half-acre site, but it's a big kind of, I suppose, not big enough, but I still managed to run a couple of K every day. And my sister was expecting her first child. The pilot that I was generally paired up with, Billy, actually underwent heart surgery during COVID. So he wasn't available, and it was her pilot who rang me and said, "Hey, are you interested in getting back out on the bike?" I was like, "Absolutely." Like, it was always in the back of my mind, I wanted to get back on the bike, and I had like that such a relationship with the club, and I kept in touch, but I wasn't riding my bike at the time. So I'd say it was about 2 years off the bike, getting back into it again, and I just fell in love with the process all over again. And yeah, and myself and my sister's pilot actually trained together for quite a little while, and I suppose the conversation started then, where people were kind of saying, like, would you think about going racing? I was like, I wouldn't even have a clue how to get into it. And it was Francine Meehan who actually reached out to me, and offered to take me out on a bike and see how good I was. So that's how kind of the conversation started. I suppose Francine had gone to London, and she also represented Ireland in Rio as a tandem pilot. It was triathlon in Rio, but she done the cycling in London with Catherine Walsh. And yeah, I'd obviously heard about Fran locally, but like never had the opportunity, I suppose, to actually chat her or get to know her. So she reached out to me and offered to kind of basically see if I was any good. And then after riding the bike with her, she kind of offered to coach me if I was interested. Everything she said, I was just like, tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. I was just trying to soak up absolute all the information. How do I get into competitive cycling? How do I get there? What do I need to do? Who do I need to become, essentially? And what does it take to get there? And like that, everything she said just intrigued me more and more. So I went down the route of getting classified and then going and competing at international level fairly soon after getting into training. So it was within the year.
And so what was that first experience like when you actually went to that first event? Because you probably, like, cycling wasn't, I suppose, in your background. So this was probably your first kind of look at cycling events and kind of things that come with that. So how did you find that step into international competition?
Well, I suppose the first step, I suppose the first thing that we did, actually, Fran piloted me, and we done a time trial that was part of the National League. And that was over in Mo, and I think that was kind of the first hit of like what a race simulation was, the prep. And I suppose TT is so specific, so it was a bit there was a bit more to it, and that was kind of the first kind of race that I'd done. So yeah, we were really happy with our time, but like that, I was just like, give me more. I just wanted more. So linked up with Claire Octagon, and we went over to Belgium to do the World Cup as part of the Irish development squad. And yeah, that was an amazing experience as well. It didn't go smooth sailing, I suppose, because Claire actually ended up ill. She ended up getting food poisoning. But we still raced. We came 10th in the time trial and 10th in the road race, which was quite good for, I suppose, my first international event. But I loved every second of it. I know Claire wasn't well, and that brought up a little bit of challenge, but for both of us, more so for her, just getting back up, getting on the bike with an empty stomach and everything. So, but yeah, she's phenomenal. She's just class, and she did a class job, and she was really professional. And I suppose that made it, for me, made the experience as well. And I suppose that's where I kind of got more insight into the elite squad and how they prepped, what they were doing. And I was just trying to kind of, like that, soak up all the information that I could and just learn as much as I could out of the experience. So yeah, that's kind of where it all kind of started to take off then and snowball. So not too long later, I was at a World Championships with Linda Kelly. So yeah.
I suppose you keep mentioning soaking it all in and trying to get all the info that you can. Like, mental preparation, mental toughness has to be a massive part of that. Like, okay, your first international event, your pilot has gone down with food poisoning. Like, obviously there's a lot to that. You want to constantly, you're all about learning, soaking it all in. Like, the mental preparation and that side of things is probably equally as important as the kind of on the bike and on the turbo training in advance of an event as well.
Yeah, like that. There's just, it's like people just see the bike and they just think, oh, it's just training, you just hop on your bike and go. But like you said, there is an awful lot, I suppose, outside of that people don't really, take in. And I suppose even my naivety to it as well, when I first started, I didn't realize the load that it really took in order to get everything right. I suppose like that, I learned, I took in a lot at a very short space of time, really. When I look back now, like, yeah, I really did just try learn from other people and see what they were doing, and just acquire myself where to the point that I needed to be at all of the time. So I was always constantly adapting and changing little things, like nutrition is key. And different things that you wouldn't really think of, even just like you said, your mental readiness for a race as well. Now I was quite lucky. I think I came to this at the age of 26. When this opportunity, when France had coached me, I was 26, and I think at that stage of my life I had gone through a little bit as well, and I think probably I would have been more mature and ready at that stage, at that time in my life, and ready for this. And I think that's a big thing too. My readiness for this was like, bring it, give it to me. I want to do this, and I need to do, I just really wanted to keep improving myself, and yeah, it's probably a big part of it too. Yeah, for sure.
And you mentioned around the nutrition and everything. So, like, at the minute, what does a week in Josie's life actually look like? So from like a Monday to, okay, throwing in the old webinar recording like today, but what does a week actually look like? Or a regular week, or then maybe a week coming up to an event?
So I suppose last week, so I just give you an example. I suppose Mondays are generally my rest day, so I'd have a day off on a Monday where I wouldn't really do much. I probably will do about 15 to 20 minutes of stretching or maybe foam rolling. And I'd catch up on bits and pieces like that. I try fit in these types of things maybe on a Monday, or things that aren't including of the bike. I'd kind of fit in on a Monday, or yeah, because Tuesday I do two sessions on a Tuesday generally. So I'll do gym in the morning and bike in the afternoon. That kind of ranges between an hour to 2 hours on the bike, an hour in the gym. My Wednesday is usually a longer spin, so that's probably generally a 3 hour session. Thursdays, it depends on what the coach wants me to do. Sometimes it could be split into two different sessions, so maybe 2 bike sessions, or it'll be all one session. So that could be a long spin, or it could be split into 2 different ones. So that's ranging from 3 hours, kind of a range. My Friday, I'd have gym in the morning, and I'd have a bike session in the afternoon. Generally, Saturday would be 2.5 to 3 hours on the bike, and Sunday would be 3 to 4.5 hours on the bike. And that's generally my week. And then just feeding myself and maybe catching up with service providers, such as like that nutrition, maybe a physio. I could have a chat with psych. So there could be different bits and bobs happening in between. We also have access to a life skills coach as well. So I try to link up with him maybe once a month or so, and just making sure I'm hitting my goals and having something to aim towards. But yeah, that's kind of my week to week.
So a lot of time on the bike is what I'm hearing. Not a surprise, but I'd say you get a lot of Netflix watched in the background while you spend 3 and 4 hours on a turbo, I'd imagine, during the day.
Yeah, I tend to be more audio. I like to
Oh,
listen
do
to
you?
maybe a podcast, or sometimes I'll throw on music. Music is a lot throughout my sessions. I'd have certain playlists that'll, if it's a really high pace intensity one, I'll generally put on something that's kind of a fast paced track. If it's a recovery type spin, I'll go with something easy. Maybe, or I'll have like that a podcast. Um, the one I'm listening to at the moment is Diary of a CEO. Quite like Stephen Bartlett. So
Yes,
yeah.
there's some really interesting ones in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's really interesting as well. I suppose that you get time to keep up on that side of things as well. Like that you have plenty of time to do that. But yeah, like, and the music is really interesting too. How you mentioned with your faster sessions and how much that actually does have to do and does play into when you're training.
Yeah.
But I suppose having you sitting here and we've spoken about international competition and we've spoken about everything, it's how do we not bring up Paris 2024? It has to be the piece that everybody mentions and everybody brings up. But like, what was that experience like?
It's hard to summarize it. I suppose like that. It's kind of, when you're in the moment, it's incredible how quick time goes. And I suppose like that, I've been asked a few times now, and looking back, I'm just really proud of myself for getting there. And yeah, like that, for a lot of athletes, they're aiming at it for a long time. I suppose for me, in the run up of everything, I suppose it was 3 years. But yeah, it was just a phenomenal experience. It's one that I'll take with me forever. Yeah, for sure. It's just such an honor to represent your country in a sport that you just love. And yeah, it's fabulous experience.
And it must have been really unique as well with actually, you mentioned about having a number of guides before, but actually going to one games, but having more than one guy or one pilot, should I say? Like, how was that experience as well? Because obviously you went from different in the track to the road.
Yeah, I suppose it's the unique one for 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 me. I suppose it was swapping over between like that track and road, but like that we had done it a few times already. Like, we were lucky enough that we had the World Championships in Rio to to do the track. And then I'd been riding with Eve, I suppose, year and a half in and around before Paris had come up. Um, so I suppose, in a sense of a way, I was kind of lucky that I had two different pilots that I could learn different things from, and two different relationships. Is tricky at times, don't get me wrong. And kind of finding what works, but and getting to know one another. But yeah, it was definitely a unique experience. But like that, I suppose when you're wearing the green jersey and you're representing for your country, you always just want to put out your best. And that's, you know, each of us that were on the bikes wanted that, so we all had the same mentality toward, being the best that we can be as a nation. And I suppose that was the end goal, really. And was why as well that we did do the swap, so that for Ireland, that we were doing our best, and putting out our best legs, essentially, um, for each race. So yeah, obviously that's kind of, I suppose, the unique thing in itself, that we were all in the same mindset there, and that's what we want to achieve, and that's what we wanted to put out, and essentially that's what we did. So yeah, class.
And I suppose I mentioned previously about seeing all the Tullamore bibs while we were in the velodrome, but it must have been really amazing as well to be so close to home that you probably got the opportunity to have a lot of family and friends there to support as well.
Yeah, like, I mean, you don't really realize, I suppose, because when you're in the village and when you're in that bubble, I turned off my family group chats and was like, sorry, you won't be hearing from me. I'm going to be in my own little bubble. So literally just train, eat, sleep, and those and catch up with this team, and like there's very little you want kind of coming in outside of that, I suppose. But yeah, family coming over, and yeah, it was unreal that it was that close that they could. Meant a lot to me, like my brothers and my sister, who I found out afterwards was pregnant at the time. But yeah, it was phenomenal to have them there. And like that, just like the support from home and the club, they're amazing. It's just, I suppose, like that, when I was in my little bubble, I didn't really have or pay too much attention to it up until the last day. And then, all the celebrations were happening and people were just really, really happy. And it's just, yeah, it's class. Like I came back and I met up at my local radio station, who I now know on a very personal basis, I suppose. David does text me regularly, can you do this? Can you do that? But it's great. It's great that, everybody's so supportive. And that's not just like locally it's class, but even on a national level, like you can definitely feel it like that. I suppose Paris is so close to home. And I think the coverage was very helpful. I think it was like everybody could tune in and out and see what was going on, and yeah, it was amazing, class.
You mentioned about being in your own bubble there and in the village and eating. Were the muffins as good as everybody says? Answer the questions the real people want to know.
Unfortunately, I didn't try them, so I couldn't tell you.
Oh, that's the question I really want to know now, Josie. All over the TikTok now, everybody and their chocolate muffins.
From what I heard, they were good, yeah. So
you were very dedicated to your nutrition, of course. I apologize for thinking any less.
I know a couple of them did try them all right.
We won't name any names, so we wouldn't want getting anyone in trouble with their nutritionists or
I heard they were
Paralympics.
good though. Yeah, I heard they were good.
Very good. 2024, obviously Paris and everything that came with that. There was some other championships and events as well that maybe some medals came home from.
Yeah, Switzerland, yeah, which came pretty soon after Paris. I mean, I was kind of lucky enough that Eve held in there up until the World Championships. I think she was looking at maybe disappearing.
She didn't manage to get away with it. You had her location tracked.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, making sure she was still on for it. So yeah, absolutely, yeah, it was class. I think it was hard. Like I ended up catching COVID in between Paris and the World Championships. So I suppose I was a bit fatigued actually going into the World Championships, and I think mentally after Paris as well, I think there was this kind of like I couldn't just relax. So it was like, we did Paris, we came home for I think it was 10 days, and then we're off again. So I was sick in between that time as well. So yeah, it was kind of one that was kind of like once it was going to be over, then I think the shoulders could drop and I could kind of actually look back at Paris a little bit. I kind of had to park Paris to one side and focus on the World Championships. And I think I was a little bit fatigued actually going into the World Championships. Didn't feel amazing, but still was keen to race and give it whatever I had left. And because it was the last one, I think I could just empty out whatever was left in me. And I was so determined as well, I think, because like that fourth place in the road race in Paris just didn't feel amazing, but did definitely kind of push me in Switzerland to really, this is the last chance, it's the last dig. So I really did dig deep, and just gave it my all, and yeah, bronze medal coming home, so happy enough with that.
Absolutely amazing. So I suppose in terms of future plans, do I dare ask what the plans are for 2025 and beyond?
Of course, with Eve retiring this year for me, we kind of said, look, we'll experiment a little bit this year, do a bit of sprinting, do a bit of do endurance. Unfortunately, the World Championships were supposed to be in the early part of the year, but to be honest, it wouldn't have worked out anyways for me, I don't think. So the track World Champions got moved to October. So we're still currently looking for a pilot for me. So we're on the hunt at the moment. They're not plentiful, unfortunately. So we're still looking. But in the meantime, I'm still tipping away. I'm doing whatever I can control to keep progressing and hitting my markers, and that's proven to be good. So which is still exciting. I suppose that I'm still progressing as an athlete all the time. And I think that's what drives me really, especially in these moments where there's uncertainty of if racing for me is going to happen this year. I think my coaches are still have a positive view of it at the moment. They still are hopeful that hopefully I'll get racing. So all going well, fingers crossed. I'll get out on the circuit this year, and we'll get the World Cups and World Champs on the road in. But in the meantime, all I can do is really focus on my training and keep going the way I'm going and progressing and hitting my markers wherever I can, keeping all the boxes ticked. And that's what I suppose is my focus for this year. Hopefully by next year the situation is a bit different and there are a bit more availability with pilots next year. Again, hopefully that's the case.
For the younger girls at home that are watching this today, what's your advice to them?
The younger girls at home that are watching this today, I suppose the biggest message, I suppose, is to leave all your options open and be open-minded about your future. I think sometimes we kind of close doors for ourselves, and we're like, this is never gonna ever be possible. And I've met people who have really overcome incredible challenges in their lives and things that you wouldn't think of, I suppose, as a young child or as a young adult. You might not think possible, but you paved your own way, I suppose. So if you think that there's a way or an opening to doing something that you really want to do or want to achieve, I think there's definitely ways of getting around things. Sometimes it's not the direct route that people take, but sometimes there's ways around things, and maybe you might end up on a different pathway that you initially thought you'd see yourself on. But I do think not giving up is probably the biggest thing.
I'm Grace de Mikita. I'm a Paralympian 1500 meter runner. I don't know how much else to say. I've competed in 3 Paralympic Games so far, aiming for LA.
I don't have any more questions to ask. Grady, you've given it all there. Grady, you said about the 1500 meters there and all things athletics. Like, how did athletics come about for you to start with? Like, how did you get involved in the sport?
So I think it was, well, I don't know if you could call it by accident, but I think I always was very active child. And when the opportunity presented itself and PE teacher came to me and he was like, do you want to represent the school in the community race? And I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna give it a go. It was 800 meters at the time. And I just gave it a go and I didn't really think of it too much. So afterwards, then I really enjoyed it, and then afterwards, St. Peter Richard came up to me and he started talking with me about the para sport and what it is. I didn't really knew that much about it back then. It was after 2012 Paralympic Games were like a big starting point of, no, I don't want to say a starting point, but big breakthrough for para sports. So I feel like from there on, it was just, getting into a club and started training and seeing where it will take me. And here we are.
And you mentioned kind of about London and like the coverage that came with that. It inspired a lot of generations, and you guys are the group that's going to keep doing that with especially considering how much additional coverage there was for Paris. But when you look at athletics, obviously there's so many different distances. So like how did you decide what kind of distance was going to be what you went with?
Well, to be honest, parasport is very limited in that regard, especially for my event. I can only compete. Well, to be honest, I feel like that's probably what I would have been aiming for, regardless. Maybe 1500 meters, maybe like I was leaning for like maybe 1500 meters, 3K. But also the reality is, we have to understand that parasport is very limited to the distances that you can do, because there's so many classes. So I personally, for me, at the moment, at the start of parasport, there was more events for my class, but at the moment, I can only, being in T13 category, I can only do, if we're talking about the middle distance or longer distance, I can only, on the track, I can only do 1500 meters, because 400 meters, I'm not created for that. So you just have to stick with what it is, to be honest.
And so to train for that distance, like what does a week look like for you from a training perspective?
It looks a lot of well, I wouldn't say, like, there was a lot of miles in the past. Well, I wouldn't say in the past. At the moment, I was a bit injured, so I had to alter a few bits and bobs. There was bike involved, but it's still running, still a lot of running. 3 sessions a week, 2 gym sessions. Yeah, I don't know. Do you want more detail? I'm just keeping it very general. But I feel like a lot of, I would say, if you're kind of from people who had a middle distance background, they're obviously quite familiar with the general approach to, I would say, middle distance training.
It must be a big factor as well. Like, you've attended 3 Paralympic Games now. The mental side of things must play a big chance. Like you mentioned, having a bit of an injury, a bit of a niggle here and there. Like, the mental side of what you're training for must have a big impact as well.
Yeah, no, it is. And it's like, sometimes would say, like, sometimes mental aspect maybe is even more important than the training. Well, training is important, because then you won't start on the start line. But if you're mentally can't be ready to perform, it doesn't matter how much training you put in. So I don't want, like, it's definitely equally important. Some people could argue how is it more or less important. I would say it's very, very important. And yeah, it is hard. I would say it is hard, especially before the games, because we have once in 4 years. It's for the athletes. That's what we always aim for, the cycle every 4 years. Don't get me wrong, every championships are important, but because it has that special occasion, because it is once in 4 years, that means you have only once in 4 years opportunity to win that medal if you're in the contention to do that. So there is obviously also taking into consideration how your preparation, everything is great. If you're in a good shape and everything is going well, you're on a high. But if that's not the case, then yeah, you really need to work, concentrate. And I would say, I think then where the people around you come into big play, that kind of help you to kind of push through those hard times. It is your responsibility as an athlete, as I would like to say, to push through, but you can't do it alone sometimes. And like, as an athlete, like, we train and we put in the work, but also, like, the support around you is very important. So I think that in those hard times, having people with a positive mindset can really help.
And the tactics when you're at racing must have a big piece to play as well. Like, you can't just go at it from the very start. Like, you have to plan your race and be really tactical about it. And we've seen that through all of your races, and I'm particularly impressed. Like planning that, like, is that a you decision? Is that a team decision? Is it a group decision? Like, how?
Yeah, I would say it would be myself, my coach. Seeing, you have to look at what your strengths or weaknesses are. What is the best way for you? What would be the best way for you to approach? Yeah, but 1500 meters, it is a bit of thinking involved, and also sometimes you just have to, maybe have plan A, plan B, but also sometimes you do have to just be able to make that decision. Like, instantly, like, because there is a plans, but then also for you to implement those plans, um, that's a decision. So sometimes it can work to your favor or sometimes not so, but you just, at the moment, you're just trying to do your best. And yeah.
And like Paris, okay, you've been to 3 games now. Like Paris must have been a really amazing experience. And we've kind of spoken to some of the other athletes today, and we've kind of said, it must have been so nice to have that much extra support. Obviously, Tokyo was so different, when we look
Yeah.
at it, and like it must have been really amazing to have that support.
Yeah, no, like the stadium was incredible, and I was very kind of like honest after my interviews, and the reality is of the para sport that we don't really attract that many um crowds. Well, it depends from the places where the events are held. I feel like that would, impact a bit other sports as well, but the reality is we, like, at the Paralympic Games, that's where we attract the most viewership, and Paris was amazing. Like the amount of people were in the stadium, it was absolutely incredible. I really enjoyed it. I was so relaxed on the start line. I was like, this is absolutely. I was like, I just have to soak it all in, enjoy the atmosphere. Like when you can feel it in the air, it was so great. And I really hope that the viewership of the para sport will keep growing with the years ahead.
The Stade de France was such an amazing arena to be in, and like tickets were very difficult to get. I know that for a fact. So like it was a pretty much sold out show for a lot of the competition, and so many kids and so many families, but obviously your own family as well, and
Yeah.
friends, teammates, and everybody that would come down to kind of watch it. Like, does that atmosphere help when you're racing? I know you hear it in lots of sports where you're saying like the fans bring it, but like does that help and give you that little bit of a lift?
Oh, like, well, before when I was standing on start line, like sorry,
That's okay.
before I was when I was standing on the start line, I was so calm, and I think because I was like, you have to, because I was like, you just have to enjoy it, like you have to take it out. So for me, it's really, I'm like, yeah, like I don't know, it's very. I don't want to say it's kind of blur, but it is kind of. I remember like running it, and you just hear people, and you're just. I don't know. It's very. It's great experience. Like it's something that's really hard to explain. Uh, but like it does help. Like it definitely lifts you up because they're like, well, like you're there now, people are there going to be watching you. So you're like, so for me, like it really
Well,
helped. I think it's great. Like I have the support, people are there enjoying the sport, like watching it, cheering. I think it's I think it's great. I think it does give. I think that's for athletes, we get the most, like we enjoy what we do regardless, but if we have the crowd, if our people there support, giving the atmosphere, that gives that extra bit of excitement, that gives a extra bit of um I would say enjoyment in the moment and experience. Like definitely, I would definitely say that it's only positive.
like even just the going back to the coverage piece and how kind of far and wide it has gone, and you mentioned about kind of maybe the lack of people there supporting para sport. Like I feel like that is really changing now. Like I know when you were racing, like we were all gathering together to watch it, and like that's such a special thing to remember with your friends. Or like
Thank you.
when I said I was coming on to watch to chat to you today, one of my friends was like, oh God, how's she getting on? And like it's so good like to see that, not even being an inspiration for vision impaired people
Yeah.
around the country, but like for all kids and for all people who want to get into it, like around the country. It's so special because we see that maybe opportunities don't always arise, or maybe you have to go find them a little bit more when you have a vision impairment. Obviously that's what we're here to help with, but like you
Yeah.
mentioned, like having that PE teacher that kind of stepped in and supported, like how important is that for people, like to have someone like that?
Well, I think people are very important, and I always say you need to be picky people that you have around you, because there's gonna be people who are gonna lift you up, and there's people like in life in general, not really gonna not gonna lift you up. Yeah, they're gonna do more the opposite. But people, I think people are so important from the learning perspective as a person, as an athlete, from support perspective. You like it's like when I said previously also, you want to have people that you could, celebrate the good days, and and also have a support in the days that things don't go as well. And sport is cruel, like there's more bad days than good days. you know or it can be. So I think that is so important, and I think you need to be choose wisely. And then if you find those people that bring positive into your life and lift you up, you have to keep them and pressure them. So yeah,
Yeah, keep the right people very
keep
close
the
is
right people.
definitely
Yeah,
a good bit of advice. And what a lot of people don't know, and kind of as a Paralympic athlete, like a lot of the time you're probably working as well as actually being
yeah.
an athlete. And like that's something that people don't wouldn't even cross their mind, that you have to try and get that in. Like you have people and they're like, oh God, I have to go run my 5K after work today, but like you have to get your gym sessions, your everything in. Like that must be a lot as well.
I don't know. I don't really. Well, every person, like I personally am very lucky. I work 2 days a week. It works for me. And I think like I treat it as people going for a run after work. So I treat it the other way around. I keep my work to keep me distracted, to keep me learning, to keep me, because there's gonna be a day when I'm gonna retire, so that I'll know what is out there. So it really works for me. I like it. I never counted myself only just an athlete. I always say I'm Greta first. So I think it's whatever kind of, every athlete is different. For some it works, for some it doesn't. Some want to do extra bits, some don't want to do, and that is absolutely fine. You need to make sure what makes you perform the best, and for me that's what makes me perform the best. So and it's been like that for a while. If not work, then it's college. So I think that for me really works, so I don't really feel like it's a chore as such.
Yeah, and like that's something as well. Like there is more to life than sport as well.
It
Like and
is.
okay, like you say that people go for their run after work. You go for work after a run, basically. But like
Yeah,
there is a lot more, and like this particularly with the being Women in Sport Week, like there's young girls out there. Like there is career opportunities, and there is so much to life like that comes with it as well.
Oh, 100%. Like sport is incredible. I love what I do. It's like it gives so much to individuals, confidence, personality, like, in positive way, resilience. I learned so much. There's so many great people. It does make you tougher, because you have to. It's so much like being involved in sports in one capacity or another. It's amazing, and like I really am grateful for the opportunities to be involved in sports the way I am, and that I can go to games, like that you know I'm was able to make the games, have that experience. Like that is incredible. But I also always recognize that there is so much, like there's so much, like, life, so much life, so much things to do outside the sport. And I think sometimes, and I think that sometimes, as an athlete, we can forget it and stay in that bubble and just like, oh, sport. But there's so much out there. So I think it's important to remember that. And.
And I suppose going back to Paris and everything that came with that, like how is that experience, like being in that bubble and with your roommate? Is it still Orla, or it was Orla
Oh,
for
Orla, always Orla.
I
Yeah,
I
Orla.
I
There's a favorite quote that I have from you two, and I met you guys after the last games, and we were at our Vision Sports Mayfest celebration, and I remember you turn around, you're like, I love sharing with Orla, because when I go on Orla's phone, she has the same Zoom, and I
Yeah.
absolutely love that. And like we
Yeah, that is
literally
just
do it daily. Like it must be really nice as well to have that kind of camaraderie.
I know it's actually funny because like we function and I don't need to worry. I know how it works. Like it's actually gas, like the little things that you don't even realize. But also I think another thing is myself and Orla were or started the sport together. So um we started our journey at the same time. So I think that's why it's been as long as I'm in the sport, she was in the para sport the same amount of time. So I think that's really nice, to have that person that you started with together at the same time and that we had this journey and we're still going the journey together. So I think like that's great. And yeah, like I love Orla, she's great. And I was like, I always it's like when we are like there's not even question about it, like who am I gonna share with this, like Orla. I was like, I think we would start raising questions if people wouldn't put us together.
Probably never get any sleep, the two of you up yapping all night.
I know it can get dangerous. I'm not gonna lie. But I think we're getting out of the system the first few days. We're like, okay, like let's get the proper catch up and then like
We have medals to win, says he.
yeah. So we do like to keep our priorities, very clear most of the time.
And the question that everybody wants answered from Paris 2024: did you get your hands on one of the muffins?
Yes, I did. It was good. It was good. I don't know. It's very hard, when people make it like such a big hype, and you're like, okay, how good is it? Like, it is
Yeah.
good, but like, like, what is like 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10? I think I even put a TikTok. I can't remember viewing it. I don't think that I put 10 out of 10. Maybe
I'll have to go
9.
back
I'm
after
very, I'm
and check.
very strict with my points.
You're very down on your what results you're giving it. But
Exactly,
look,
yeah.
it's important to aim high and we want to. But yeah, look, at least you're being honest. You're giving
Yeah.
the results that people want to know. Greta, thank you so much for coming on with us today. Before we finish up, there's two last pieces. So the first piece is, what advice would you give to your younger self when you're looking back at it now?
I think patience, and I still give that advice to myself even now. Patience is the key. It's the key, being patient even when, things don't go well, or like when the results you don't want to, just being patient and believing in the process. And I feel like if you know that you do everything what you can, the only thing that then you're left to do is be patient, which is sometimes really hard, but you just have to do it.
And then it might be the same, it might be different. So obviously, again, with it being Women in Sport Week and International Women's Day, for the girls that are watching, whether it's young girls or older women who may be watching and thinking maybe sport is something or it might not be something for them, like what advice do you have for those girls that may want to get involved?
Try the sports. Try, like, I don't want to be like, oh, let's sport, like, like I don't, it doesn't I don't mean to, like what I say, it doesn't really matter. What do you love to do? Like, if it's sport, is amazing. Try as many sports as you can and find the one that you will love and that will be passionate about, that you will, the sport that you would like to stick with and see where it will bring you. But if it's not sport, if it's something else, like, it doesn't matter, whatever makes you happy, whatever it makes you get up in the morning and strive for. I think that's the most important thing.
Judith and Chloe McComb.
Guys, if you want to just tell the listeners or the watchers at home a little bit about how triathlon came around, because when you think of kind of sport and kind of sports you get involved in, you're probably thinking the individual ones, you're running, you're swimming, you're cycling, but how, I suppose, did triathlon come? And it might be a joint one. We can go with you, Chloe, first and then go across. But I'm really interested to see kind of how triathlon came around for you guys and how it was the sport that you chose.
Very much by accident, is the short answer. In school, we weren't overly sporty at all. We did a little bit of karate, and we did hiking and things like that, but not overly sporty at all. It wasn't until we got to university that we started rugby and rowing. We really enjoyed rowing and kept that up after university, and got selected for the development squad for para rowing for Ireland. So I took over. Yeah. Unfortunately, that didn't work out. We went to a Paralympic Sport Expo Day. I always forget the actual title of it. But we went to sort of an open day for parasport, we'll call it that. And we bumped into a guy from Triathlon Ireland, not a blind joke, Eamon, and he came up to us and he was like, "Can you swim? Can you ride a bike? Can you run? There's a training day in Belfast in a month's time. Like, I'd love to see you there. Like, come on ahead." So we did, and yeah, I suppose the rest is history. Yeah.
Oh, great story. Quite similar to Katie George's story as well. So if rowing doesn't pan out, generally there seems to be pretty lucrative opportunities elsewhere. So yeah, that's amazing. And I suppose from that first day, what was it like to actually go to that first come and try day? So it was probably a bit unnerving as well, going to something you probably didn't know an awful lot about. I know like most people probably don't know an awful lot about triathlon before you kind of get into it.
Yeah, like we had learned how to swim whenever we were kids. And like on holidays and stuff, we just splashed around in the pool. But like whenever we went to that training day, we could just about survive 25 meters, like from one end of the pool to the other. And then around home, we would like ride our own mountain bikes and stuff. But we were put on the back of a tandem, which we had never experienced before. And of course, in the back of a tandem, you can't steer, you can't see, like you can't change gear, anything. Did I say change gear twice? I don't know. You can't steer, you can't change gear, anything. You're just sitting there holding on, pedaling. So that was a totally new experience. And yeah, we could run. Yeah, I think it was, I suppose, a bit different running tethered. Yeah. But I think running tethered is probably the easiest of the three to get used to.
I'd say so. So like from that first day to now, like what does a training week look like now? I know we're trying to get this in between your swim training after this, but what does a training week actually look like for you guys? And it might be different or it might be similar.
Fairly similar. That's why I'm looking at Chloe. Yeah. You can answer this one. I suppose Monday to Friday, first thing, we're both swimming. After that, it's usually sort of like second breakfast, and then into another training session, which could be a bike or a run or maybe a bit of strength training or rehab or prehab work. And yeah, just generally sort of 3 sessions per day, with food in between, like very, very heavy on the food, but you're doing a lot of training to to warrant that. You need the energy.
Yeah, that's the excuse that we stick to it anyway. That's what we'll go with. And I suppose the mental side of training probably plays a big role in that as well, where you're saying you're doing 3 sessions a day, 5-6 days a week. Like it probably does get like exhausting, never mind on the body, but on the mind as well. And coming up to kind of events and stuff, it's probably the mental piece plays a big role.
Yeah, so I suppose whatever you say, like, oh, we're swimming and cycling and running every day, it does sound a bit samey, a bit boring, but we have our coaches and they give us the sessions and they're all different every day. So sometimes it's a hard session, sometimes it's an easy session. And then sort of podcasts and music get you through that. But we also work with sports psychologists, so like in the lead up to races, like you would sort of be talking tactics with them as well as coaches and guides. So like we have a good team around us, so that sort of mental side of things I think is pretty well covered, especially in the lead up to races. That's that's whenever I would put more of a priority on the mental side of things, whereas sort of during training it would be like if something pops up, we'll deal with it, but then towards races it's like zoning in on that and sort of getting that focus for the race. I have nothing more to add. That was pretty conclusive there.
And you mentioned about the podcast as well. Are you gonna let us know what's in the ears? When we spoke to Linda, she reckoned Diary of a CEO was a big one that to Linda, to Josie, should I say, Diary of a CEO was one that she was quite into. What's in your guys' ears when you're listening? Or
my absolute favorite, and I save them up. I don't listen to them every week. It's like if I have a really hard session, it's like bring out the Simon Mayo's Confessions podcast, because that gives you a smile, makes you laugh, which sometimes isn't a good thing, but that would be my favorite. I sort of listen to a really wide variety of different things. It really just depends on your mood. Sometimes I'm sort of like, yeah, we'll go for comedy. Sometimes it's kind of like, no, you know what, we'll go for true crime, and just like running along listening to a true crime podcast is sometimes a little bit terrifying. Really
Makes you run faster.
Yeah.
Yeah, so someone could be chasing you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's really interesting as well. And Josie was saying, depending on her session as well, like the music she would be playing would be so different and stuff. So I suppose it's sitting down and actually going, what do I? That's a big part of it as well. It's actually just like, what do I want to listen to today? Like, what kind of session am I feeling as well? Probably plays a big piece in that. When you guys as well are out like in the triathlons, obviously that relationship with your guide has to be a really big piece as well. And you've probably kind of throughout the years gone through maybe a couple of different guides, or in time when you're training, you may have had different guides kind of on the bike versus the run, and now you're kind of looking at honing in that with that one kind of person. How has those relationships kind of developed over time? And like, because it's not even as simple as just for a tandem pilot on a bike where you have just the one person and it's one activity. Like you have 3 different activities to actually refine and to find where and what works best, and like that must kind of be a big piece.
Yeah, I suppose it is very much based on friendship. I think for both of us, we are very good friends with our guides, Catherine and Emer. And I think, yeah, if you didn't have that friendship, it would be a lot more difficult to not only, I suppose, travel the world and share hotel rooms, but also like fully trust them in the swim and bike and run. Particularly, I suppose, the swim and the bike, just because the bike you're like flying along at crazy speeds, and the swim, like you're in open water. Like you have to trust that they're not gonna get you lost, or I don't know, they could unclip the tether at some stage and just let you swim away. Emer and Catherine.
You'd hope that you don't get any arguments that day anyway.
Yeah. But yeah, it's definitely built on friendship, and I think we've both been very fortunate that both Emer and Catherine we've just clicked so quickly together, and it's just been, I suppose, very easy. Yeah.
And I suppose like for that kind of piece where you went from trying triathlon, finding out about that first come and try day, to actually going to international, like what was that first international competition for each of you guys? Like what was that experience like? It must have been amazing.
Yeah, I suppose up until our first international races, like I suppose whenever we started racing internationally, that's when we sort of had a steady guide. Me with Catherine and Judith with Paul. And up until then, it was just sort of local races around Ireland where we would have put out something on Facebook asking for someone who was willing to jump on the front of a tandem, and we would have met them on race morning, maybe 2 hours before the race. They would have looked at the tandem and been like, probably ride that.
Yeah.
We'll work it out.
Like me and Anne, our first international race, we met 2 days before the race and got on the tandem together for the first time. So like, yeah, well, not a great example. But yeah, I suppose it was just incredible. Like I suppose just being thrown into that together with a guide, just very much into the unknown, especially just in regards to international racing, just sort of going against people of other nationalities and getting to wear the Irish tri-suit was just, I suppose, just an incredible experience.
From that, I suppose it's hard to ignore the big piece in that Paris and all things Paris 2024. Like that must have been an amazing experience for you guys, for your families, for everything that came. Like obviously it's so much success internationally that year, but it has to, I suppose, probably, I might be putting words in your mouth, but I'd imagine that's probably the highlight so far.
Yeah, it was incredible. And I suppose like having our first Paralympics in Paris, it's as close to home games as I think we're ever going to get. So thankfully some of our family and friends were able to come over to be there to watch. But yeah, it was incredible. Like the atmosphere at the race, and even in the village, was just amazing. Yeah.
what was it? I suppose having family there as well, like you were in the same race, you started on that same start line together, like as siblings. That must be a really amazing experience. I know you probably all you want to do is beat each other. You probably don't care too much about the rest of the ones in the race, but it must be a really kind of amazing experience to line out, but also for your family to be there and see it as well.
Yeah, like I suppose the fact that both of us were there was just such, like, I suppose, like a blessing. I think it would have been very difficult if it was just one of us that was on the start line. So it was stressful to have to race against your twin, but it was also really good that we could share that experience of racing at the Paralympics. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it must be amazing. Like, and I suppose the want is probably there, but do I ask about future goals and plans? Is there a want to maybe be going in the future?
Yeah. I think for now, for me anyway, it's just about enjoying what I do. Yeah, just enjoying the experience of being able to race around the world. And yeah, I suppose ultimately, I think for both of us, LA 2028 is, I suppose, at the back of our minds, trying not to think too deeply into it because it's sort of, I suppose it's only 3 years away now. But yeah, that's sort of definitely the back of our minds.
Yeah, LA is definitely a big goal there, but
Absolutely.
yeah.
I know LA is a good bit away, but there's been some success this year already coming from the household. So you've been doing quite well this year, and hopefully with some future races as well.
Yeah. I suppose this year is sort of a low stress year in terms of racing. We don't have to sort of qualify for anything, so we're not sort of racing around the world trying to get to every race. It's sort of laid back where you can sort of pick and choose where you like to go, and maybe races that you've enjoyed in the past and go into them. So yeah, it's I suppose a nice year to have, especially after the craziness of last year and trying to qualify and all that. It's nice.
And that must be a massive piece as well. You're saying like you're racing around the world to qualify, but you're literally racing around from competition to competition. There's probably times you don't even get home between them. I would imagine a lot of the time you're probably going constantly from place to place. Like that has a big piece as well, like not being at home or not having your own pillow. Like, do you have your comforts? I know he's speaking to sports psychologists before that they're like everyone has their one thing that they bring or that they do or that thing. Like there must be a massive amount of that involved where you're constantly like living out of different hotel rooms or Airbnbs or whatever. It must take it out of you as well.
Yeah, there was a few times last year I know that I was away for a few weeks at a time in about 3 different countries, and just living out of a suitcase. And you come back and you're like, oh, but I'm heading away in 3 weeks. Is there any point in unpacking? But it's been an incredible experience. I think learning last year I did a lot of learning about long haul travel, so I picked up a few tips and tricks along the way. Yeah, I mean, we both did geography at university, so it's good that we're, I suppose, kind of using that degree in terms of we can point on a map where we've been. So yeah, it's just incredible, like the places that we've been to, like places that you never would have thought of. Like last year, I always think Judith was in Samarkand in Uzbekistan, and like I'll be honest, I had never really heard of Uzbekistan, let alone
Not
know
really.
what it was. Yeah. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
So you mentioned those tips and tricks. Are you going to share them with anyone? Are we going aisle seat, window seat? What's the best one to pick?
I think my biggest one is always wait till you're last on the plane, and that way, whenever you're walking through, if you see an empty row, just dive into it. Yeah, that's
smart. I like that. That's a good one. So I suppose that goes kind of on to future advice and kind of advice that we would give to people. So like you guys would have had some support from Vision Sports throughout the years in different ways in terms of bikes or equipment grants or whatever that might have been along the way. Do you have kind of any advice for someone looking to maybe get involved in sport? It might not be triathlon, it might be triathlon, it might be it might be something else. But do you have any advice for maybe young girls, particularly with it being Women in Sport Week, to get involved in sport?
I suppose just give it a go. You're not going to know if you truly enjoy something by sitting back and watching. You have to actually give it a go, and if that means dragging a friend along and sort of being like, look, will you just come with me for tonight, and so you're not alone. Definitely, but just get involved and just try different things, find what you enjoy, what you're good at. Yeah, just don't be afraid to give it a go.
Yeah, I think bringing a friend along too, because it can be a bit daunting, I think, at the start to join something completely new where like everyone else seems to know each other. So if you have a friend, or if you know someone who wants to try something, go along with them, give them a bit of support, give them a bit of company. You might enjoy it as well. We're very fortunate in that we're stuck together half the time anyway. So
Yeah, like I think if I was an only child, or if Judith hadn't been interested in triathlon or anything, I don't think I would have got involved.
yeah,
Just because I wouldn't have wanted to go myself, whereas we both sort of wanted to give it a go, and yes, we were both a little bit apprehensive, a little bit nervous, but the fact that we had each other to sort of back each other up and sort of be like, it's okay, I have no idea what I'm doing either. It made it a lot easier.
I think it's pretty clear to see you got a pretty quick idea of what you were doing based on everything. So I think, look, girls, that's absolutely brilliant advice. And I suppose there's a lot of girls out there that are looking up to you and everything that you do. So it's great for you to kind of give that advice. And hopefully we see lots more twins, in particular sisters, young girls, or people of any age getting involved, because it's never too late to get involved in sport. And triathlon's a great example of that, where you see people much later in life getting involved. So
Yeah.
I suppose, yeah, it's great to kind of see that. And thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today, and kind of wish everybody a happy International Women's Day and Women in Sport Week.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us, and hope everybody has a great week.
Yeah.